It's my feel-good breakfast show.
So it's time for another edition of our new Wednesday feature where we focus on the unconventional side of the law, and we're calling it So Now What? And we've been joined once again by our friend in the law, expert lawyer and director at legalese.co.za, Eitan Stern. Thanks for being here, man.
Only a pleasure. I'm wondering how long is it still a new segment for?
It's going to be new forever, for as long as we want it to be.
I like that.
Well, what we're focusing on is not as new, because
Yeah.
we're talking about second-hand purchases
Yeah.
and how the law relates to that. So one of our Expresso team members wanted to sell a guitar. It is second-hand, so we want to know what are the illegal and illegal ways, if they are, of selling something second-hand.
Okay, so for most things, for most products, there aren't laws around selling things secondhand, but with certain products there are. So if you're selling, for example, medical equipment or diamonds or copper, then there are rules around selling things secondhand. Or with houses, you can't just sell your house, you have to go through a proper process. But for the most part, if you're selling your goods, TVs, guitars, cameras, things like that, then you can just go ahead and do it. There are no rules around preventing you from selling it secondhand.
Yeah. Of course, the issue of payment is always up to talk about when these kind of things happen.
Yeah.
Do you deal in cash if the person wants to pay you via EFT, money, wallet, whatever it is, wallets that are out there? What's the best way to go around it so that you don't get scammed?
Okay, so, with most things, as I was taught as a kid, cash is king, but in this day and age, we're not really using cash much. So for the most part, people are using EFT payments or credit card payments. But the problem with this, with EFTs, is that people have figured out how to make them look fraudulent. One of the things, you do have to be careful when receiving an EFT to make sure the money has actually entered your account before releasing the goods.
Yeah.
And scammers have found weird and wonderful ways, faking proof of payments, taking the goods before the money is cleared. So it's crucial that you make sure the money is actually in your account. And if you call your bank will be able to verify that for you. And all banks will have a way for you to verify if the money is in your account. So you do have to be very, very careful when dealing with EFTs.
Yeah. One of the things I remember from first year contract law is the term voetstoets.
Voetstoets.
And buying something as is.
Yes.
All right. So what are some of what would happen if you do buy something as is or voetstoets and it breaks within the first week? Do you have any legal recourse?
Okay. So the law over here separates between two types of sellers. You got sellers that do it in the course of their everyday business, and this would be shops, pawn shops, second-hand goods salesmen, and then the rest of us who are just selling things, like selling a guitar on Gumtree or something like that.
Yeah, just to get some extra cash on the side.
Exactly. So if you do it for a living or in your ordinary course of your business, then you are bound by what's called the Consumer Protection Act, this brilliant piece of legislation that protects us as the consumers. And if you buy something and you're bound by the Consumer Protection Act, then that good has to be in a usable condition. It has to be durable for the amount of time that it should be usable. So if you buy, for example, a TV, you can assume a TV should work for, 3-5 years. If it breaks after 6 months, that would be a breach of the Consumer Protection Act, and it has to be in reasonably good condition as well.
Yeah.
So when you're buying stuff from an official salesman, you got the CPA to protect you. When you're not, when you're just buying something from a regular person, then if you insist on that sale being voetstoets, which means sold as is, then you're buying the goods, and you are any of what we call patent defects that you can actually see, you're buying it with those. But if there are any what we call latent defects, hidden defects, that you are not told about, then you won't be liable. Then you can get your money back if there were latent defects in the goods. So with the TV, if it had a big scratch across the front and you bought it, that's your own problem. But if there was a little wire in the back that was on the verge of breaking and the seller knew about it, then you could ask for your money back if you had a voetstoets clause in your sale.
All right, very interesting stuff. We're going to keep Eitan here for a second part of the conversation when we are talking about second-hand goods and the legalities around it in our new feature, So Now What?
It's my feel-good breakfast show.
So we're back again with director at legalese.co.za, Eitan Stern, and we're talking about buying things second-hand, what protection you have as the buyer, as the seller, and understanding the course of business there. So if I've sold something second-hand and the person who's bought it from me is not happy with their purchase, what grounds do they have to get their money back?
Okay, so again, if there was a footstoots clause in that sale, then they would only have grounds to get their money back if there was something hidden that you lied about when you sold it.
Yeah. Do I have to return the money then?
Technically speaking, you do if there was a footstoots clause, but for the most part, these sales, second-hand sales, don't have contracts.
Exactly.
So it's a bit of a wild, wild west situation if there's
Yeah.
no contract.
Yeah. So don't try and go and sue the person if there wasn't any contract and you're trying to get your money back and they're like, well, you bought it and that's it.
Exactly.
It's your loss kind of thing.
So you should really be guided when buying second-hand goods on the price of the goods.
Mm-hmm.
If you're buying, for example, a guitar for maybe R1,000, then it might be a waste of time to get a sale agreement together because it might not be worth it. But if you're buying a car
Yeah.
for 50, 60,000 rand, then put a sale agreement in place, and that might say something along the lines of, if there are any mechanical defects to this car which you haven't told me about,
Yeah.
then I'm going to want my money back, and then you've got a recourse.
So just to kind of close it off, paperwork-wise, because I mean,
Yeah.
when it comes to the law, if it's on paper, you pretty much have grounds to
got
stand
something,
on.
yeah.
So let's give a kind of a broad look at when you should apply paperwork to the contract that you are undertaking with somebody, or when you should just, don't bother.
Okay, so for me as a lawyer, I'm always going to say get a contract in place.
Even if you
because
just write it yourself.
100%. Contracts can even be in an email. It doesn't need to be a formal document.
Oh.
So, as long as two people have agreed to certain terms. So, me as a lawyer, I'm always going to say get a contract, but you can be guided on how much effort is it worth and how much is at stake. So again, if it's a 1,000 rand object that you're buying, then it might not be worth it. But if it's quite an expensive item, then get a contract. And a contract doesn't have to be a complex thing. It just has to say what you're buying, the price that you're buying it, and what you're expecting from the other person.
Yeah, yeah.
And if you sort of get those terms down and both parties agree, then you've got something to hold people accountable for.
Yeah.
If you don't, then it's just really your word against mine, and it's a difficult situation. So if you're ever worried, it's a good practice to put in place. If you're buying something online, or if you're buying something from a friend, put something down on paper so you've got recourse.
Quite interesting that you mentioned the email thing here.
Yeah.
So any form of communication between buyer and seller, whether let's say it's on email, maybe it might be over WhatsApp, or
Yeah.
text message, or even through a chat platform
Yeah.
on said purchase site or buying
Yeah.
and selling site. Does that constitute legal understanding and legal agreement between two parties that you can use? So yes, there was no signing of any agreement, dated here,
Yeah.
agreed here, but the fact that you spoke to somebody, they spoke back to you and agreed on certain terms.
Yeah.
Does that communication
So theoretically,
count?
yes, it would. Even verbal agreements count. If we agree to something verbally, they are binding. The real issue is in really starting to prove it. So the problem with WhatsApp threads or chat threads is that there'll be a long thread and it's very hard to work out who said what. The advantage of having something down on a piece of paper in clear, bullet-pointed terms is that there's clarity around it.
Yeah.
So it's less a question around binding and more a question around, do we both understand what we're agreeing to? And that's really where the value in writing something down in a contract or in one document stands. So at the end of your thread where you've discussed the terms, take out the pertinent terms, the price, what you're buying, identity of parties, the place that you're going to buy it from, when the person's going to get paid. Put it onto a piece of paper. It's going to make things work a lot better.
At the end of the day, you are spending your hard-earned money, so
sure.
it might be worth that 5 minutes.
100%.
Eitan, thank you very much.
Only
Always
pleasure.
appreciate it. So if you have any interesting legal conundrums that you'd like to ask us on this segment, So Now What, make sure that you share it with us at Expresso Show, and maybe we'll cover it in future segments.